Hi, welcome to Infusion Health, the podcast. I'm comedian Chris Patrick, a.k.a. Self-Proclaimed Power Man. And I'm here with my co-host and significant other, Rach.
Hey, guys.
Now, today we got an interesting show. She's an intuitive transformation coach. She has the company Phoenix Rising here in Minnesota. Minneapolis, Minnesota. And anyway, her name is Angie Sparks, and she's going to talk to us about some of the stuff she does, some of the healing stuff she's done. She's done some, before we did this, she did a few things on Rachel, and Rachel's going to talk about it. So let's, Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you're an intuitive transformation coach. Can you give us your background and how you got started in this and all that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, my background before healing, I was an accountant. And that's very different. But that is because way back in high school, I was drawn to the healing fields. Okay. And it kind of scared me because the path didn't look very clear. And accounting was very easy. Like, okay, I know I get this degree, I get a job like this, and I do it. In college, I almost changed my major again.
So you did get certified.
Yeah, I'm a CPA, certified public accountant, in my background. But then in college, I almost changed my major to psychology. Okay. Because I loved it. But again, fear. I was afraid. And so I let that fear stop me. And then throughout life, lots of things kept coming up in my life, pointing me back to it.
Okay, so you got certified. You were actually working as a business accountant or a private accountant.
I was in public accounting and then private accounting.
Okay, so you were doing the job. You were an accountant, and then all of a sudden, then we get to
Then my kids ended up having all sorts of food issues. I started really diving deeper into the holistic stuff.
Food allergies or
sensitivities and allergies. My oldest had at one point he had eczema from his ankles all the way up to his head.
Was that from nuts or because I know a lot of kids have food allergies to nuts, peanut butter, stuff like that.
It was the list of his allergies and sensitivities was so long that the company that tested it actually retested it because they thought the results were wrong. Oh, wow. It was overwhelming to say the least, completely overhauled everything. But the interesting thing is, and this is part of what led me to energy healing versus just like holistic nutrition, because I very much believe in that, but was because what actually helped my kids heal the most, because my oldest was the worst, but they all had issues, was when I actually started doing energy healing for myself. Okay. And healing myself started to heal them. And part of it is because when you shift your energy, the energy around you shifts and it opens it up for other people. But also it was because they had been living in a state of fight or flight with a heightened nervous system for so long because I was in such an unhealthy place.
So what made you want to heal yourself? I mean, was there something that was going on that you said, "Oh, I got to heal myself"? Lots of stuff. All that fear that I talked about, basically I had lived my life in fear and made a lot of decisions out of fear, including ending up in a marriage that wasn't healthy. And it got to the point where I was just sick and tired of feeling angry all the time, yelling more than I wanted to as a parent. And in addition, my body was physically falling apart. I had a lot of GI issues. At one point, I had a practitioner say, "I'm shocked you've never been diagnosed with IBS." And I said, "I'm not." And he said, What's IBS?
Irritable bowel syndrome. Oh, okay. And I said, "I'm not." And he said, "You aren't?" And I said, "Well, I've never sought the diagnosis." So I'm not surprised I haven't been diagnosed. But and I was having a hard time with like sleeping. Like I was so tired all the time. I was literally trying to stay awake, driving my kids home from events in the afternoon, things like that.
So my question is when you started doing the energy work, and you said you were dabbling in it in high school, for me, myself, dabbling in the energy work for my first time was, how do you deal with the stigma? The stigma that has been growing in everybody's head. You don't do the therapist, you don't do energy work, that's witchery and all that other stuff. So how was your first time?
Yeah. Well, the healing the healing stuff I was interested in high school was more nutrition related, so still a little bit more heavier into like accepted stuff. But when I got older and got into it more, to be honest, it took me a long time to be comfortable with it. I had a lot of religious shaming and religious abuse to sift through to be open to do it and then to be open to talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
My question follows with that is, what do you, when you're showing other people this, how do you get them over that stigma?
Really, I just try to create a safe space so they can feel that it is safe.
Sure.
Meaning, like, a lot of people have spent their life not actually being heard or feeling seen. And so creating that space where, no, I will listen and you are seen and you have permission to show up exactly as you are, that alone can help create just a safety that starts creating a space for them to dabble into it. And then just offering a lot of reassurance along the way that it's okay. It's totally okay if you are afraid at times. And you don't have to do it this way. Right. There are other options too. If that feels more aligned with where you're at right now, that's okay.
So when you said religion, what religion were you raised, or were you practicing at the time?
I was raised Catholic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then you started to heal yourself, and then what made you get how you transferred into this, into doing what you're doing now as opposed to accounting?
Well, it really was that when I knew that divorce was what was going to be happening, I realized, okay, because throughout our marriage, I had been varying states of working part-time, working full-time, stay-at-home mom. And right before the divorce, I had been stay-at-home mom. So I was realizing that, okay, this is a major life change. I'm going to be needing to go back to work, and realizing that I literally couldn't. I mean, it was so obvious to me that you have to face your fear. Now is the time. I felt it in my soul, because the other option, I was like, no, that's not even an option. Because when I did accounting, I used to tell people, I feel like I'm dying a little bit each day that I do it, but I'm doing it because it's practical. It helps the family. It gave us opportunities. But I just knew this is a major life change, and you need to just do it, Angie. It's time to face that fear.
So when you were doing accounting, you were working for a company. You weren't doing private accounting. You were working for a company.
I started in public accounting working for Arthur Andersen.
Okay.
So if you remember Enron, I actually worked there when Enron happened. And then I did work for some private companies, worked for MoneyGram, worked for Boston Scientific. Okay. I also... and
that's basically just looking at numbers, crunching numbers all day in, day out.
Lots of spreadsheet work.
Yeah.
Yes. Spreadsheet wizard. Yes.
And you just said, you got bored with it or whatever, or just wasn't challenging enough?
It just didn't feel in alignment. And I didn't have the words to say it that way at the time. And that's what I work with my clients on, is helping them understand truly who they are, release layers of shame and release the layers of the shoulds that they've been told growing up, so that they can actually get in touch with who am I and what are my gifts and how do I love who I am and how do I use those gifts. So it just was very not in alignment. Now, I'm very good at recognizing patterns. That helps in accounting, also helps in healing. But so there were things that I could focus on to say, well, I like this aspect of it, so I'll focus on that.
All right.
So what made you, I mean, as far as getting into this, because I'm pretty sure you're doing okay financially with the job of accounting, but then to get into this, I mean, I know the pay scales.
Well, I know in a past episode that we've done is getting out of your mind work and going more into your heart work. And I think a lot of people don't understand that mind work is actually shutting off the connection to your heart. So you need to find out what your heart work is.
Yes, that's a very good way to say it. I love that. And there's actually a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about like zone of competence, zone of, I can't remember all the zones, but the top one is zone of genius. But he said a lot of people get stuck, right? A zone of excellence. That's the one before the zone of genius. Cause he said, because when you're in your zone of excellence, you're doing a good job and you're typically making good money. Like life is flowing to an extent, but there's something inside of you that is like, this isn't quite right, but you have to take that big leap through the fear to get to the next level. And that's kind of, I was like, yeah, in accounting, I was in that zone. I did very well. I was successful at it, but it just didn't feel right. Like you said, it wasn't heart aligned.
And like I said, it was probably pretty good financially. Yes. But then all of a sudden you get into this, and like I said, the pay scale is going to be different.
Yes. And I would be lying if I did not admit I have had multiple times, I call them my ugly prayers, where I will connect with my spiritual support team and be pretty open, honest, and frank, and be like, what the F am I really supposed to be doing this? Because like, am I really supposed to be doing this? If I'm not, please make it so obvious. It's like getting hit in the face. And if I am, please make it so obvious. And every time I have had that conversation, within a day, I've had 2-3 people reach out wanting more information, signing up with me. And I'm like, okay, now you do know I need to pay the bills with this.
And that's an interesting question. And Rach hates when I go off topic, but that's an interesting thing because people have been asking us to do stuff, video stuff and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, we're just starting out, we've gotten like, 50 something shows and doing the YouTube channel, and people want us to do, and I'm like, well, are you getting paid for it? And I'm like, she's like, well, no. And it's like, you do this on spec. So if we do this, we can use this to shoot, to get more money. But I'm like, well, maybe we should start. I mean, even if it's just like gas money or something like that, just something,
Because there was one time that we went about 45 minutes out, and Chris was like, we're not getting paid for this. I'm like, we're new. You have to establish yourself and get accreditation, and then you can flourish out. Not only that, when you're a baby, you're learning all the editing tricks. You're learning all this. I remember when Chris was looking at the computer that we just purchased for him to be able to edit everything, and he's like, it's so different, because Chris used to have a YouTube channel of his own, so the editing equipment is so different.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, and that's actually, do a lot of that with clients too, is like belief breakthrough stuff. Like, oh, what beliefs are we holding deep down that are holding us back? Yeah. Whether it's fear or even believing like, well, I'm not deserving of that. I'm breaking through that. Yeah. So
when you got into this, did you go to school for this, or you just learned?
I went through a few different certifications.
Okay.
Became Emotion Code certified, became Tiny Habits certified. I'm Reiki certified. I also am 200 hours certified in yoga. And then I've done just a lot of learning on my own and a lot of working with mentors too.
And that's the thing with working with mentors, you learning it and then, having to pass it on, So you got into this, and then you started your own business, Phoenix Rising. And then what exactly do you do with Phoenix Rising?
Well, I work with specifically women who've been betrayed. I help them rise from the ashes and take flight. So what I do with them is help them get back in touch with who they are and release. It's a combination of releasing energy that's not serving them, that's weighing them down, energy they've trapped over the years that's creating patterns that aren't serving them, or symptoms that are causing pain. And then also helping equip them with tools so they learn how to do this on their own too. So I always tell people, I'm doing my job well if you eventually don't need me.
Sure.
And with the whole kind of like with a lot of holistic stuff, where at first you might need a lot of support, and then eventually you might need to see me here and there, but it's like once every few months versus once a week.
Yeah. And I think that's a little different than therapy, because therapy is more, in the Western world, and you have your therapist, and there's sometimes like no end until you're like, okay, I just don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think with holistic, it's about looking at the body and getting to a place where you're secure. You're good.
Yeah. And learning how to trust your own intuition, because your intuition gives you the answers. And that's what I try to help clients do, which is with the removing energy, it's removing that shame and the shoulds and stuff so they can get back in touch with what is that voice inside of me and what does it sound like? What does it feel like? And what is it telling me to do? Because that's where you're going to be best guided.
Right.
Well, that's kind of my thing, because there's times like, you know, me and Rachel will be like, and she's like, well, this is going on. I'm like, well, that was yesterday. Who cares? Move on. You know, well, this is going. I'm like, okay, it's over. It's done. Okay, there's nothing you can do about it.
Cord cutting. So.
Yeah, move on. You know.
Well, what could be happening though is that it's triggering wounded inner child stuff. So that's because when one person's like, it's not a big deal, and the other person's like, yes, it is. It's usually because part of them is recognizing, oh, I've lived this before. And so that can actually be a sign that there's something from energy from the past that's there. And when we release that energy from the past, we're not going to get as triggered. And that's like when you were mentioning counseling, like I'm a huge proponent of it. I've done years of counseling, but the difference that I found, at least for myself and the counselors I went to, they were very, very good and super helpful with showing me this is what a healthy communication pattern is.
Right.
And this is what a boundary is. And those tools. But I was still triggered a lot. Yeah. I felt like, okay, this is awesome that you're telling me this is what what's healthy or how to handle it. But I almost had more shame then, because I was like, now my head knows what I'm supposed to be doing, but why can I still not do it?
Yeah.
And the energy healing is what actually, for me, reduced the trigger.
Okay.
So that instead of being triggered and then trying to back out of the trigger, I'm now like, oh, that doesn't bother me as much. So like now my kids the other day were having a fight, and in the past I would have literally felt almost out of control mentally, like overstimulated, not knowing how to handle it, which would have been my inner child being like, this isn't safe. And now when the last time it happened, I was able to almost like I was watching a movie, be like, oh, this is what's happening. They need me to hold space for them. And I was like that actual parent they needed.
Yeah.
I'll let them fight it out. Well, when you talk
that
about,
can be dangerous with 3 boys.
That's even better.
That can be dangerous with their 5.
I grew up with 2 other brothers, so my mom had 3 boys. But when you talk, which is interesting, because you talk about your inner child, and there was an incident, and I'm going to share this with the people. Rachel, we were upstairs, and Rachel got on top of me, and I said, get off of me. And she said, no. And I turned her around, and I got her, and I like put her in a chokehold, and I said, you going to get off me? You going to get off me? And she's like, yeah. And she's like freaked out. She's like, I've never seen you like that before. And we almost broke up over this. Yeah. And she was like, why did you do that? And I was like, but then I had to really go back into myself and think, okay. And I realized that when I was a kid, my brother used to always do that to me. He always used to put me in holds and stuff like that where I couldn't get out, and I felt, but on the good thing, when I wrestled in junior high, I led with 2 points escape, because I knew how to escape, And I actually thank you all the times you did it. But then I realized that it was always him doing that. And when that triggered something in me where I was like, get off of me. And then the next time I said, get off me. She said, no. I said, listen, please get off me. You're starting to take me there, and I don't want to be there. And I said, listen, I'm not saying I need to be praised or anything like that, but at least I was able to recognize it, to go, hey, I'm starting to go there. This really ain't a good spot for me right now,
Well, 2 things. I also had problems because I grew up in a very abusive home. So I had to deal with that emotion that he was throwing at me. I was able to recognize that he was going, there was some energy there. But a disclaimer, if you're in an abusive relationship, do not stay in it, right? Correct. Because this is not abuse that's going on with me and Chris. It was a trigger that happened, and I had to come to my own energy and heart feeling to know that he's not this person. And it was a logical choice, not an emotional choice.
Yeah.
But when we and if there's any counselors out there listening to the show, please give us a call. We'd love to have you on the show. But when you talk about abuse, a lot of people think abuse is just physical. There's other ways of abuse, and it's not just man on woman. It's also woman on man. There's also verbal abuse and stuff like that can also be just as bad as hitting somebody. So I just wanted to say that about abuse.
Yeah.
And emotional abuse.
Yeah. And I like what you said, that it can happen, women happening to do it to men, because a lot of men do not vocalize that. But what I like about you, Angie, is that you're working with that wounded child. And as people will see in the podcast that we talked about, it can even be from a year ago. It can even be from 6 months ago that you're dealing with that wounded child.
Yep. Well, and that was a perfect example, Chris, of having awareness in the moment. And I like to tell people, this was a phrase I first heard from a woman named Carol Tuttle. I learned a lot from her, but she says, every upset is a setup for healing. So when we're triggered, we can either just go down the path of, getting mad, yelling, or if you're in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, you're a flea and you remove yourself. You can keep playing into that unhealthy pattern, or you can say, wait a second, this is a setup for healing. What is this telling me about myself? What is this telling me about my inner child? What is this telling me that I'm still holding on to?
Okay, well, I want to ask something as far as race, and not just race, but as far as economically too, because you got some kids who, and black or white, who were raised, didn't grow up in the best neighborhood, didn't grow up in the best household, and are messed up. But then you also got kids too who raised in a good neighborhood, grew up in, real nice house, parents had money and all that, and they're still messed up. So they're always saying, well, because they're poor and all that, they're messed up. But then also too, you got kids who were raised poor and all that and grew up just fine. You got kids who were raised in real nice households.
Right.
So there's this thing that people are always saying, well, it's because of this, because of this. I'm like, well, this kid had everything given to him when he was a kid. He grew up in a nice home. Why is he still messed up?
Yeah. Well, one of my personal beliefs is that we do have spiritual contracts, like that before we come here, we say, I want to experience this or that. I want to learn this. And so that, I believe, plays into it. But also there's this concept of little t trauma, big T trauma, but it's all trauma. And lots of little t trauma becomes big T trauma. So the death by 1,000 paper cuts idea. And that definitely what you're saying rings true. I was one of those people who grew up in what looks like very good family. We were financially secure, raised in a safe neighborhood. I had lots of opportunities. So I have had that thought, like, why did I have so much to work through and heal from? And why did I make decisions that got me into very unhealthy situations? And realizing some of it is that we do have ancestral energy that we're holding, and certain people, their spirits have chosen to take on more ancestral. Some of it is just innately who we are and what our gifts are going to make us more aware of certain things. So there's a lot that plays into it. But I tell people when I work with them, it can be, if you're a child and you wake up from a nap and you cry and you want to be out of the crib and no one comes for 10 minutes, that can be trauma for you. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it could be parent leaves you home alone. You have no idea where they are, and they're actually out,
doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Right. And getting in trouble with the law and bringing people home that they shouldn't. That's also trauma. But one thing that can be very, very healing for people is to remember, like, healing isn't a competition and it's not a comparison, because we really can't compare our story to someone else's story. We all have permission to have that story.
Well, that's one of the things too, because like when Rachel's sick, she's like, oh, I'm sick. All right. Well, the stuff's down here. This is down here. Here's your medicine. Okay.
Go to the gym.
I gotta go. But then I call people. I call them sick ones. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, please. I ain't gonna be there for you. There's stuff down here. There's soup down there to cook. But then I realized, why am I like that? And what it was, and my parents weren't abusive, but they had to go work. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of allergies, especially around this time of year. So I had to stay home from school. And my mom's like, okay, well, the soup's in here. Back then we didn't have cell phones. So it's like, I'll call once, hang up, and I'll call back. It's me. just stay in bed, stay here, don't answer the door for anybody, back in the day, know. And I just basically took care of myself. So then growing up, when Rachel said, well, I'm sick. I'm like, okay, well, hey,
Yeah.
And I realized the reason that is because I always had to take care of myself when I was sick. So I'm just like, well, you got it,
But I think that's such an awesome example too of like how our relationships can help us see that in each other. Like it can either be a source of just pure irritation, or it can be like I never, like you had a realization about yourself, and it helps you understand him better and him understand you better, and also can help you realize, oh wait, maybe I do deserve to be taken care of when I'm sick.
Maybe one thing that's definitely helped with Chris realizing that is I deal with a lot of chronic things, a lot of invisible things, so it's not just your common cold, it's in bed with a migraine, or I can't get out of this state because it just hurts my body too much.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, just go to the gym. Or when we started this relationship, and it's definitely turned into, okay, does she actually need me? Or does she need something? Or can I tell her, hey, you're strong enough to do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, like you said about deep trauma and stuff like that. Now being African American, somebody posted something on YouTube about how African American people still have the effects from slavery, and I was like, what? And I looked back at it, and I was like, okay, well, that was years ago. What? But still, there's these traumas that still come back from that, and I'm like, man, this has been generational.
Yeah.
But my question is, how can we as a people, as a nation, how can we start to heal from that?
And I don't think it's just our Black and brown people. I also, there's a lot of LGBTQ problems. That we talk about our Black and brown problems. But, we don't always talk about our LGBTQ problems. And they were, that's generational also.
Yeah. And I mean, with what you said, my personal belief is we start healing our country and our world when we start focusing on ourselves and saying, I have to own my piece. Because back to that whole like adage that we've been told probably since we were young, like you can only control yourself.
Yeah.
But it really is true that as we choose into healing, I mean, like I had been told, as you choose into healing and focus on yourself, it will open up the energy for people around you to choose into healing or not. It'll make it easier for them. You might even see stuff shift without them trying that hard.
Right.
And I experienced that with my kids in a big way, like, whoa, a lot of stuff shifted. And there was, and so I really feel like when we start owning our own triggers, healing ourselves, we really do start to heal the world. And there is an amazing book, by the way, and I really wish I could remember. The author's name is escaping me right now. He is a social worker out of Minneapolis. Okay. It's called My Grandmother's Hands. And have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's specifically about what you're talking about. He talks about a lot of what I do, but using slightly different terms because he comes at it from social work terms.
Yeah.
But the ancestral component to the race issues. And he also talks about like if you're a member of the police force, that there's a whole different set of ancestral stuff and what's actually at play in this. And then how can you heal that? So
going back to you, since we don't have a whole lot of time left, I loved doing the YouTube with you. Is it fair to say that when you started working on yourself, you started working on your children and then just wanted to branch it out? Because for myself, I learned my own education and then decided, it's time to teach other people how to be their best advocate.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I did so much healing. When you start experiencing it personally, the power of the healing, and start experiencing like, wow, I feel so different. I can look in the mirror and like who I see, and oh my gosh, I am not judging myself and everyone around me all the time, and I'm not angry all the time anymore. And it feels so freeing and so empowering. And so that is why, like with my business, the values I have, what I want people to feel is confidence and empowered and free so that they can be their authentic selves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that is definitely, I was like, I want to share this.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you for joining us. The name of the company is Phoenix Rising. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they? You got a website or?
I do, and the easiest way, I'm in the way of in the process of transitioning it. So the easiest way is angiespartz.com.
Angie Spartz, 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 Angie Spartz. .com?
Yes.
.com, and look her up if you want to start going to the way of energy healing. And she also does Zoom too, so you can also talk to her.
Yes, I have clients all over the country, and I've even done a session with someone in France.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, before we close out, like I was saying, me and Angie paired together on the YouTube channel, Infusion Health YouTube channel. So that was just awesome, and we really got to show you guys how to do some of those modalities. But definitely, if you're having challenging times, you can reach out to Angie.
Thank you so much, both of you, for letting me join you today.
And thank you. And Rachel, you want to close us out?
All right. So.
Oh yeah. That was an accident. That was an accident. That was an accident.
That's our close.
That was an accident. I accidentally. That was an accident. My fault. My fault. My fault.
I love your pre-recorded buttons.
That was an accident. That was my fault.
Oh, that made my day.
That was an accident.
You guys, we're trying to make you your best advocate on here. Until next time, have a great one.
Take it easy.
That was awesome.